Sawadee. This week you'll be focusing on your teep kick, which is a thrust. Your teeps are effective in knocking your opponent off balance, as well as keeping your opponent away, especially with somebody who's got a longer reach than you, and then also to disrupt the flow of your opponent. A teep will not be effective if it's used at the wrong distance, so for example if you're too close. It's also not advisable to use your teep too often if you're facing an opponent who's good at catching your teep, because once your leg is caught, you lose control, putting your opponent in the dominant position. So your teep kicks are characterized by kicks that thrust and connect with the bottom of your foot. We are going to focus on the straight teep, which is essentially with your foot pointing upwards, though there are multiple variations on your teep depending on the angle of your foot. Your straight thrust in Thai is your teep trong. So the basics, which you must always remember, is starting from your square stance. Your lead teep, in other words your teep with your front leg, is usually used as a defensive kick. So it needs to be quick, and you need to be able to get that foot off the ground as quickly as possible in reaction to your opponent striking. Therefore you need to be light on your feet. You can't expect to get a teep off the ground quickly if you're flat-footed. Stay on the ball of your feet. You also need to ensure that you have the C-section of your body and your guard up. Your straight teep is simply lift up, push out and back and down again. Lift up, push out and back and down again. You will see often, you turn around this way, that fighters may drop their hand to give a little bit of extra thrust in their hip. That is fine. However, I don't do that because I'm quite short, my opponents are usually taller than me, and it's risky for me to drop my hand. So instead of putting my hand down, which also acts as a counterbalance, I push my hands slightly forward, keeping them in front of my face, keeping myself out of the line of fire of something coming towards me. As you push your hips forward, your head comes back slightly, but it should stay in line, in a vertical line with your feet. If you're going to go back too much, you're in danger of losing your balance. You need to ensure also that as you thrust your hip forward, your chin stays down, your C-section is maintained. Okay, so your first exercise with your lead tip, up, out, back. Make sure you're coming up onto your toes and back. Okay. You want to ensure that it doesn't drop down like that. Putting your weight forward, you're in danger of your opponent connecting your head. So it's up, you've got to be able to retract it. Back, down, back, down, back, down. Try also during the round that you lift up, push out, in, building the muscles in your thighs and your hips. Important with your lead tip is not to step forward before you tip, for two reasons. Stepping forward, your weight is not securely distributed over your feet, so you're very prone to be kicked over. Secondly, because your lead tip is defensive, by adding in a step, you're actually making it 2 moves instead of 1. And you don't have time for 2 moves when you're reacting to a strike coming towards you. So instead of a quick 1, you make it 1, 2. It's too slow. For the intermediates, we are asking you to add in the jump. So the jump is a way of incorporating your teep as a more aggressive, offensive kick. Jumping forward slightly, you're gaining distance, making it more offensive. Okay, now your rear tip from the back is a little bit more aggressive as well, because you get more power, but also at the same time, because it's coming from the back, it takes a little bit longer to reach your opponent. So it's not quick like your front leg, you can just lift. So up, back, up, up, back. Again, if you're tall, you can drop your hand to get a bit more thrust in. Or alternatively, just push your hands forward, helps with your balance. Intermediates, with your rear teep, you can use it to step forward, gaining distance, and then follow through with the roundhouse with your new rear leg. So, teep, gain your distance, round, and back. So you can also use your lead tip as a counter to a roundhouse. So what you're going to do is block your roundhouse. Simple full body block. So block and tip. Because blocking a roundhouse, you know your opponent is at a certain distance, it makes your tip an effective countermeasure. You'll be at the appropriate distance to tip. So block, tip. Intermediates, you can try block, tip, straight away. Block, tip, straight away, without putting your foot down. Your next exercise is a rear tip followed directly by a rear roundhouse at the same leg. So it's important you have control over that tip, so you bring your foot back to your original stance in order to deliver that roundhouse powerfully. Okay, so your tip is a long-range weapon, probably the longest weapon that you have. It can be used then in combinations, either with other long-range weapons if you want to keep your fight at a certain distance, or you can use it as a lead to bring your fight closer, and incorporate then other medium range and close range weapons. This is an example of using your tip to come in closer to be able to deliver other weapons. So you have a block, a lead tip, interchange your stance with a roundhouse stepping forward, deliver a new cross punch. Intermediates to advanced, you can add jab cross roundhouse on top of that. Your last exercise is a jab cross, roundhouse, rear tip, same leg, now stepping forward, deliver your new jab cross. For experienced students, you can add an extra roundhouse to the end.